bit of a weird one for me. I really didn't expect to like Professor Layton. I don't like most puzzle games, or at least I don't think I do. I absolutely loved Portal, and I certainly engage with puzzles and other genres of games on a regular basis, because how could I play games without having to push the occasional block or heat the occasional key? But aside from that, I just don't go to this genre. I was generally so burnt out from school that the idea of willingly engaging with this type of content didn't sound like a particularly fun idea to me. When I was younger, I did try out plenty of them, from Braid to Honey Pop, but aside from Portal, nothing really clicked. And I haven't touched the genre at all in recent memory, unless Ace Attorney counts. I look at that series in a somewhat different way, though. Regardless, I tried to go into Layton with an open mind. I'm not sure if I'm just far enough away from school that it's not a source of constant stress anymore, or if Layton just had some sort of special spark. Probably both. I did run into some issues, but I really did have a wonderful time. At any rate, I'm Kalice, and I recommend Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Kinda.
There we go. Critical thinking is the key to success.
A couple of FYIs and clarifications before we get into the game proper. Layton did win a Patreon poll, so a big thank you to everyone who voted in that. I played the HD version for mobile, specifically on BlueStacks, so it would be convenient to record. There's also the DS version as an option for people, but I imagine at this point the mobile version is the most accessible version, and it has additional cutscenes and a couple of other additions, so that's definitely the one I recommend. To kick things off, our protagonists, Professor Layton and Luke, are packing up a car and heading off somewhere, in a very gentlemanly way. By way of a conversation in the car, we're given exposition for the plot. Pretty smooth and natural, actually. Good job on that. Layton has been asked to provide assistance in a strange inheritance dispute. One Baron Augustus Reinhold has passed away, and in his will, he stated that anyone who finds the Reinhold family treasure, the Golden Apple, will be granted his entire estate. After 2 months, no one has been able to find the Golden Apple or even determine what it is with any specificity. Layton has a feeling that this somehow links into a larger mystery, which is why he agreed to help Lady Dahlia, Augustus Reinhold's wife. The map to the town actually comes with a puzzle that Lady Dahlia prepared as a test for Layton, which serves as the first puzzle of the game. After figuring out exactly how to get to the town of St. Mystere, Layton and Luke find the drawbridge raised. Apparently the engine is out, and the drawbridge operator doesn't know how exactly to use the hand crank, which means you have to solve another puzzle to get the drawbridge down. I'm sure you're starting to understand the flow of the main narrative. Problem after problem will arise while unraveling the mystery of the Golden Apple, and most of those problems will come with a puzzle to solve. It's definitely not always as direct as this introductory tutorial section, but there's almost always a puzzle to solve to get out of a situation or to appease someone whose assistance you require. After entering town, you head towards the Reinhold estate to meet Lady Dahlia and many other colorful characters, and then the game opens up a bit. You'll always have some main narrative thread to follow in the town, but you can also explore and talk to people, and of course solve puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. Professor Layton himself is kind of a perfect character. He's the ideal gentleman. He's polite, intelligent, socially graceful, and calm under pressure. He can look at any situation, even an incredibly dangerous one, consider the facts, and determine a proper course of action, be it who to question next in an investigation, or how to effectively disable an opponent in a fight. What really ties his character together for me is how kind he is. Plenty of characters that share traits with him would probably come off as jerks, or at the very least emotionally insensitive, which can work well or not depending on the narrative. MCU Tony Stark has been fucking both, actually, but it's just really refreshing and wholesome to see a character like this who takes people's feelings into account, not just as a factor in his thought process, but as an important one. And of course, he loves both solving and presenting puzzles. He's a good boy, possibly one of the goodest boys. Luke is also a good boy. He's Layton's apprentice, joining him on his adventures. He provides a good balance to Layton's calm, composed demeanor in that he's very expressive. He'll more readily laugh or cry or show his fear or get excited about the things happening. Layton has a nearly unbreakable emotional filter. I don't know if Luke has one at all, actually. In some ways, he functions as an audience surrogate. Since Layton is trying to teach him, he has a very good reason to explain concepts that may become important to the plot or puzzles, as well as share his various deductions. Some puzzles are also contextualized as Layton presenting them to Luke for Luke to solve. Luke's a bit immature because, he's a child, which can lead to him coming off as abrasive, but he idolizes Layton and does his best to live up to his example, quickly apologizing and correcting his behavior at Layton's request. A proper gentleman in training, this one. Layton and Luke don't really majorly develop as characters throughout the plot. They're there affecting the plot and other characters. The plot isn't really affecting them in terms of who they are, at least. It kind of reminds me of things like traditional Sherlock Holmes narratives or Indiana Jones. The main characters do have a major influence on the narrative, but the other characters are the ones who go through major developments. The village of Saint Mystere is somewhere in England. It's not exactly clear when the game takes place. Some aspects of it seem modern while others seem very dated. Like, I don't think anyone has a cell phone, but also characters make modernish cultural references sometimes. I just don't know. I think it's left somewhat vague on purpose, and I never found it to negatively affect the plot, so sure, why not? The characters that you encounter on your adventure through Saint Mystere are widely varied and honestly one of the best parts of the game. They're weird and interesting and overall just really fun. Character design wise, their body types are all over the place. It definitely isn't trying to emulate real world proportions. It can be weird, but it always came off in a very charming way to me. It was delightful to even just see each new character design. Add in their off-the-wall personalities and wonderfully written dialogue, and every individual character became a joy to interact with. The characters are all hand-drawn and each have a cute, unique animation that they do while talking or just standing in the environment during your exploration sessions. It is clearly and repeatedly expressed early on that the inhabitants of Saint Mystere are for some reason absolutely obsessed with puzzle. This initially felt like a convenient and somewhat contrived excuse for pretty much every NPC in the game to be concocting brain teasers to challenge you with, but honestly, having seen and interacted with these characters, it makes complete tonal and logical sense that they're just like that. It just made me happy to exist within this setting. I would definitely not want to live there though. A trip to Puzzletown is refreshing and fun. Living in Puzzletown might actually be a nightmare for me. I don't want someone to ambush me with a logic question disguised as a math problem when I'm just trying to get some fucking groceries. Those characters were definitely my main motivation to continue playing early on. Unfortunately, the plot is pretty subdued at the start. For example, you spend a good chunk of the early part of the game trying to track down a cat that ran away, not exactly high stakes. Some danger and additional intrigue does happen pretty early on, a crime takes place, and naturally, Layton and Luke are among the list of suspects. There are a multitude of mysteries introduced throughout the game. They do all eventually tie back into the main narrative and have satisfying answers, but you don't get to learn any of those answers until like the last quarter of the game or so. It makes the story feel very lopsided. You only have more and more questions for most of the adventure, and I didn't feel a lot actually pushing me forward towards those answers. The pace feels meandering. Aside from that crime, there's no real danger in the early bits, and my response to learning new information was almost something like, huh, that's weird, but okay, before going back to enjoying the exploration. Like, okay, there's a bit where you see a character who is very clearly a villain, and a Snidely Whiplash-styled one at that, who then just disappears for a huge chunk of the narrative. It's weird, and not in a particularly good way. The last quarter of the game, meanwhile, is a nearly non-stop thrill ride. Crazy events and revelations take place back-to-back with very few breaks. More fantastical elements also get introduced during this time. I obviously won't list what these are, as the specifics are massive spoilers, but it actually did a surprisingly good job of remaining grounded in logic while still involving some absolutely fucking wild stuff. Like, the events that take place and all of the mysteries linked to them do make sense if you assume that whatever that fantastical thing is actually real or could actually happen. It's fun to try to crack a mystery like this that doesn't just devolve into complete nonsense, and I definitely need to commend the writers for managing to juggle the fantastical and the logical. I will say that I figured out one of the larger mysteries relatively early on, and it was one that involved fantastical elements, so I think that's a good sign that those things make at least some degree of sense. Or I'm just weird. Also, a very unfortunate thing that I genuinely can't believe they didn't fix on the re-release, there's this thing in your pause menu menu where you can review all of the mysteries that you currently know about. When you figure out the solution to each mystery in the narrative, their description updates with what the deal with that mystery is. One of these actually spoiled one of the last revelations of the game, maybe 10 minutes before I got to it, which took away some of the punch of that moment and overall felt really, really bad. Maybe don't read the solved mysteries until you beat the game and reload your save file. I did still have fun with the story. All of the plot points are ultimately clever, well thought out, and crazy, and lead into something very heartfelt that made the whole experience feel incredibly wholesome and worthwhile. But the extreme difference in pace felt jarring, and the early part of the game did occasionally drag on or feel kind of pointless, narratively speaking. My sessions with the game usually didn't last for more than an hour or two until I reached that final quarter. Like, there just wasn't much pushing me forward, even though I was enjoying my time. The story does feature animated sequences from PA Works. Their work tends to vary pretty heavily in quality from project to project, but here the animation is actually really well done. I can't really show the more elaborate sequences because wouldn't you know it, when shit is going down, that's usually where the spoilers live. There's unfortunately not much to be done about it, but if you're playing on a large screen, you can tell the sequences were initially meant for DS resolution. There's some pretty awful artifacting, but the animation itself does look great. The music is also absolutely wonderful. There's a lot of the more classical instruments, pianos, violins, those types of things. Genre-wise, I really don't know how to classify it, but I do know that it did an excellent job both setting and maintaining the mood of the narrative, exploration, and puzzle solving, from whimsical to mind-bending to mysterious. It may seem like I was putting off talking about the puzzles, which I guess I was, but it was just for video flow reasons. Not everything's gonna have a deeper meaning, unless there is a deeper meaning. There's not, it's just at this point in the video because it is. Truly the power I wield is a fearsome one. So yeah, as you can probably guess, you'll be spending a very good chunk of your time with this game solving puzzles. When a puzzle begins, you'll be taken to a separate screen, given the name of the puzzle and its description. At the top of the screen, or on the top screen on DS, the puzzle's description will remain, then on the bottom of the screen you have to do something to solve the puzzle, be it selecting from a list of options, circling something, typing an answer, drawing lines, moving objects around, or something to that effect. Each puzzle also comes with cute, unique art that is somehow related to the puzzle and sometimes has to do with solving the puzzle. Even on puzzles that I didn't like, I usually appreciated the art. After submitting an answer, you will be judged by a victory or loss screen.
How does this sound? I've let you down, Professor.
Assuming you got the answer right, there will be a brief victory screen that congratulates you for solving the puzzle and often provides some additional commentary or explanation. I like the breakdowns of why the answer is correct and would have appreciated if every puzzle had that so I could make sure I didn't just stumble into the solution. These screens also have a related piece of art to the puzzle, which again is usually pretty cute. There's an incredibly wide variety of puzzles. There are some puzzle types that have repeats or concepts that are reused with a different context, but overall each puzzle provides a unique experience. I found the vast majority of the puzzles genuinely clever and fun. Puzzles apply concepts of logic, algebra, geometry, pattern recognition, and stuff that's just trying to make sure you're paying attention to particular words or phrases in the puzzle description. Those ones will probably make you do way more work than is necessary if they catch you off guard, so be careful. And probably more puzzles that don't fit into any of these particular categories. One puzzle might ask you to solve a seemingly complex problem with something present in pretty much every home, asking you to think outside the box. Others might present some variant of one of us always tells the truth, the other always lies, requiring you to test the logical consistency of statements. Others might ask you to rearrange matchsticks in a certain number of moves to change one shape into another. Others might ask you to plot out paths that meet a certain set of requirements. For an example of a possibly tricky question, I'll read out and describe how to get the answer to one of the puzzles. A man has been prescribed 10 pills. Starting today, he must take 1 pill a day, but because the concentration of the medicine is different in each pill, he must take them in a specific order. Since the pills all look the same, the man has decided to write numbers on each pill to help him remember the order he needs to take them in. How many pills does he have to number if he wants to keep track of the order? Your first impulse might be to say that he has to number 10 of them, but that's not the lowest possible number. He has to take one of the pills today. He might as well take that one before labeling the others. Then if the next 8 pills are labeled, he'll just be left with that one unlabeled pill on the 10th day, so he only has to label 8 pills total. If you stumble on these puzzles, as I very often did, your reaction to solving them might be something along the lines of, "Oh, fine, that's clever," or "Fuck off, really?" My reaction was usually the second one, followed relatively shortly by the first one. My second favorite puzzle type were the river crossing puzzles, where you have to follow a set of rules that ensures that a group of animals can properly get across a river without killing each other or running away or something in the process. You're given a list of rules about how many animals can cross the river at a time and what determines a fail state. Then you have to get all of them across the river. My favorite type were the chess queen problems, where you have to place a certain number of queens on a chessboard in such a way that no queen blocks another's line of movement. The size of the board, number of queens, and how many queens are already placed varies. These are both apparently like pretty traditional puzzles, but I enjoyed them a lot, so I guess there's a reason they've stuck around. I don't know. There are a few puzzles that are either poorly implemented, not well thought out, or that I just thought were kind of dumb. The one that sticks out the most as a sore spot in my mind is a puzzle where you're supposed to determine what chairs would be, quote, completely suitable, end quote, for a multitude of events at an auditorium. Yes, the answer makes some sense, but it just didn't feel like a puzzle to me, and the answer given doesn't feel completely suitable. I don't think any chair would be completely suitable for a long list of things. That's why they make different types of chairs. Most suitable, sure, but completely suitable is way too fucking specific. There are also some puzzles that seem overly time-consuming, where even once I knew exactly what I needed to do to actually get an answer, I found myself spending 10 or more minutes actually working towards that answer. It didn't feel satisfying, it just felt tedious. Also, the difficulty curve of the game in general could be much better. Simplistic puzzles can very often be followed immediately by absolute killers. I'm sure this can be very difficult to balance properly, different people think in different ways, and nothing but absolutely mind-destroying puzzles towards the end of the game might grow tiresome, but generally speaking, the game should probably increase in overall difficulty as you progress. Instead, it feels kind of random and arbitrary. This is a problem that's mostly solved in the sequel, so yay, but that doesn't solve the problem here, so This could very well be due to my lack of affinity for the genre, but there are certain types of thinking or puzzles that I don't like engaging with or really have trouble wrapping my head around. And at least so far in my life, I haven't had much success in properly learning these beyond basic memorization of things that I was being tested on in school. The most notable of these are puzzles that require theoretical spatial reasoning. I have genuinely never been good at visualizing 3D shapes that I can't actually see or like walk around in a video game. I theoretically understand what a drawn cube would actually look like, sure, but I can't picture it in my mind, let alone more complex 3D objects or sequences of objects. Maybe I just think in 2D? I don't know. The other puzzle type that most often plagued me was slide puzzles. I don't have a complex reason for why I don't understand these, I just don't. They break my brain. Perhaps this goes without saying, but if you have a particular puzzle type that you don't like or type of thinking that you really hate engaging with, the game may very well ask you to do that in some capacity at some point. How much this bothers you is very much going to be a personal thing, of course. You can find the answer to every single puzzle in this game online if you come across a few that you just don't want to or literally can't solve. And again, how okay you are with doing something like that is a question that only you can answer. So, you do you. When you're on the puzzle solving screen, you're given a few tools to help, at least in the mobile version. Seriously, just play the mobile version if you can. Basically, you can go into a memo mode and write down anything you want. There's a shape drawing tool, a shading tool, a coloring tool. I'm probably only showing footage of just drawing and maybe erasing things, because that is what I used for the vast majority of the time, even when some of the other tools would have saved time. Thinking on it now, maybe I shouldn't be playing a puzzle game that's asking me to be clever instead of stubborn. Oh well. The memo is nice because it means that you don't need to have a piece of scratch paper to write notes. You can just play it all on your phone. The only other thing I'd want here is a calculator, and it's not like the game ever asks you to do particularly complex math, and if you're on your phone, you already have one anyway. I just have no faith in my mental math skills. There's a system in place that's meant to reward you for not just brute forcing puzzles, since you can retry them as many times as you want. You're rewarded points, called Pickerats, I like the name, that unlock bonus content. The amount of Pickerats you get for solving a puzzle goes down if you submit an incorrect answer, which only really applies to puzzles where you actually have to hit submit or select an answer from a list of options. After some quick research, I learned that as long as you solve all the puzzles, it's apparently possible to get all of the bonuses, even if you make a bunch of mistakes, so yay. I'm crazy and save scum to ensure that I got as many Pickerats as possible. Gotta make the number go up as high as it possibly can. Video games. This was inconvenient, but it was also something that I didn't need to do, so I can't really blame the game for that. But I did save very, very, very often. Obsessively. You move by clicking the shoe in the corner of the screen, then selecting an arrow to change screens. Truly an adventure. I already said I really liked this part of the game, though the context for some puzzles is pretty questionable. Like, you'll just look at an obvious object in the environment, then Luke or Layton will go all, "Hey, this reminds me of a puzzle!" Then into the puzzle screen you go. Kind of a threadbare justification, and it wasn't as fun or cute to me as the ones that were better integrated. Like, there's this one NPC who hates a couple of other guys and really doesn't want to run into them when they all go to work in the morning, so you have to plot out a route for each of them to take where they couldn't ever run into each other. I also really appreciated how the puzzle obsession in Saint Mystere would sometimes actually seem to be somewhat unhealthy. There's more than one character who complains of not being able to sleep because they're having trouble with a puzzle. You might have an actual problem. Please talk to a medical professional if this happens again. Layton can't be here to galaxy brain all of your puzzles forever. Not that I can't relate to being unable to sleep for seemingly arbitrary reasons. I may have insomnia. Missing puzzles is a sort of weird subject. You can kind of miss them, but kind of not. If you progress the plot before solving all of the available puzzles, the ones that leave the environment will be sent to the mysterious yet probably benevolent Granny Riddleton, so you can solve them at your leisure. This is cool, but it doesn't let you see the dialogue from Layton, Luke, and NPCs before and after the puzzle. I didn't want to miss any of that delightful dialogue, so I used a guide. Actually, Lily read a guide for me. Hello? However, the layout of the guide directs you in such a way that you can avoid looking at the puzzle solution until you've actually solved the puzzle, which means you can use the guide to whatever extent you'd like without ruining your gameplay experience. I'll link the guide we used in the description. Not having any properly missable puzzles is important because there are certain points where the game will ask you to solve a certain number of puzzles before progressing. Usually this is framed as Layton and Luke needing to prove themselves to an NPC. Fair enough, I think it's an entirely fair ask for the puzzle game to actually ask you to solve puzzles. I might just be weird though. Also, after you've completed a puzzle, you can replay it at any time from the puzzle index. I didn't really feel the need or desire to ever do this, but it's a neat feature nonetheless. It does seem designed with short sessions in mind. There are journal entries from Layton that detail story beats and direct you towards where you need to go next, so if you take a break from the game for a while, you won't be completely lost. They're also just as well written as the dialogue and do a bit to characterize Layton. It is a bit funny to think about him writing some of these entries during incredibly tense or action-packed moments, and he has this habit of writing in a way that doesn't give away his deductions before they'd come up in the plot, which definitely felt like the slightest tickle of the fourth wall to me. Still, it's another convenient and cute feature that gave me even more writing to devour, so I'm willing to look past those as potential issues and just concede that Layton is actually extra enough to just pull out his journal while his life is in danger and jot down an entry about how he thinks he might have a theory. I do really love the characters in this game. But yeah, on the short sessions thing. When you load a save file, there's also a brief recap of recent events that points you in the right direction. I don't usually find myself benefiting too directly from features like this, but it's unobtrusive and there's nothing in the game that stops you from playing for hours at a time or detracts from the overall experience for the sake of portability, so yay on that front. I am absolutely never going to stop wondering what Kingdom Hearts 358/2 could have been if the gameplay was as good as the story. Damn it. While you're exploring the environment, clicking on almost entirely random parts of the background will let you find things. One of these things is hint coins, which can be used during puzzles to give you a hint. Wonder of wonders that. Each puzzle has 3 hints of decreasing obscurity that will point you towards the correct solution of a puzzle you're having trouble with. There aren't enough coins to get every hint in the game, so you're meant to use these sparingly. It's good that there's something in the game to help people out with puzzles that they're stuck on. It may have kicked in my "but what if I need it later" paranoia, paranoia, plus saving them changes a little icon in the pause menu, which was cute. You can probably guess that I basically used none of these hints in the actual game, to the point that I don't know if I can actually find footage of me using a hint coin, but I could still access those hints if I wanted to, thanks to that handy guide that I already mentioned. I really got a lot of mileage out of that. Thanks so very much to Catrielle, who worked on that. She did really awesome work, and it vastly improved my experience with this game. And I'm sure those guides will continue to be incredibly useful for my playthroughs of all the other Layton games too. They're legitimately some of the best guides I've ever seen, and an invaluable resource for anyone who wants any degree of help with this game or any other game in the franchise, including Versus. Do you want the screech too?
Yes.
Really?
This too.
Oh. Alright.
Sometimes I very clearly state where the hint coins are, and Alice just doesn't. She just doesn't understand my words. And then she clicks around on the other side of the screen, and I'm like, no, the right. And she moves like slightly to the right. I say on the right side, and she moves slightly to the right. And I say on the far right, and she still doesn't do it.
I'll just chalk that up to that spatial reasoning problem
No.
that I have in my brain.
No. You're just a dummy.
Sometimes. Sometimes I'm smart.
Okay.
Oof. In addition to the other additions, the mobile HD version also adds in a new type of thing to find in the background. Puzzle charms. They're a bunch of cute, uniquely designed charms. Collecting enough of them unlocks more bonus content to look at, which is neat, even if it feels a bit tacked on. I'm pretty sure there's a couple of references to later games in the series with these, but I wouldn't know because I haven't played those yet. There are also hidden puzzles in the environment. Most of these are pretty difficult and are the puzzles with the least amount of in-universe context. Luke or Layton literally just go, "Oh, it's a hidden puzzle." And then the puzzle starts. I'm sure there's some vast conspiracy to unravel that ties back to some all-powerful being that hides these throughout the world to test the mettle and worthiness of mortals. That or the devs just happened to make some puzzles that they didn't know how to contextualize, so they just put them into the game. It's definitely one of the two. I have a strong preference for the puzzles that have proper context. It makes me feel more motivated to solve them. I still had fun with most of these, just not as much as I did with the ones related to NPCs. There is a problem with actually finding these various things though. They really do have almost entirely random placement. All of the locations are tied to something, a crack in the pavement or a light, but it's nothing specific or particularly consistent. Each background has tons of possibilities for what could contain something, and it's very easy to just not click the right spot. And on top of all that, new things can be added to backgrounds you might have already clicked on once you progressed in the plot. Before I switched to using the guide to find everything, I had resorted to clicking all over every single background available to me in every chapter. It quickly became tedious and unfun. Thankfully, that very same guide I already mentioned can entirely eliminate all of the guesswork. This definitely improved my experience, but as usual with this kind of thing, you do you. There's also a few other types of collectibles that mostly lead into other puzzles that you can chip away at over the course of the game. Basically, certain puzzles will reward pieces of a torn up portrait, furniture, or mechanical parts. You can assemble your collected portrait pieces in a sort of jigsaw puzzle way. For the furniture, you're supposed to decide between Layton and Luke's rooms at the end. There's a convoluted-ish explanation. Point is, their rooms are bare to start off, and that's not a particularly comfortable living situation. Placing an object in one of their rooms causes them to comment on it. You're supposed to put together the perfect room for each of them. It's a bit of a guessing game at times, but it comes with a bunch of extra dialogue, and I absolutely adore the writing in this game, so the process was really fun to me. Then there's a very special friender that you construct with these mechanical parts. It's not really a puzzle, you just kind of push the button and the part gets added to where it's supposed to go. I was kind of surprised that you didn't at least have to slide the part to the right place, but whatever. These are all really nice long-term goals to work on as you explore the town and solve puzzles, and completing each one gives a reward of some kind. They could be a bit better integrated, I suppose. I burst out laughing at the implication that people were rewarding Layton and Luke for solving puzzles with beds and other random furniture items, but it wasn't plot relevant and collecting all of the stuff was fun, so fair enough. Outside of the main game, there's a bonuses menu with some extra stuff. There's concept art and profiles and a music player along with some other odds and ends. It's fun stuff, the profile descriptions are especially fun, but I'd advise you avoid those things until you hit credits. There are absolutely some spoilers in there. There are also additional puzzles in these games because, of course. There are weekly puzzles. Basically, when the game originally came out, for a few months after release, every week a puzzle would become available to play, which is a pretty neat idea. There's 27 of these. About the first third I found to be pretty underwhelming, but the rest were on par with the puzzles in the rest of the game. It's literally just a list of puzzles to solve. Again, I prefer the ones with some degree of context. It could have been contextualized by like Layton solving a puzzle on the Sunday paper, or heck, writing a puzzle for the Sunday paper, or something to that effect. Honestly, just anything more than nothing would have been appreciated. FYI, these are pretty tricky to acquire on the DS version. You basically have to download a save file or use an action replay, which is another reason that the mobile version is the better option. You used to just get them by downloading a little unlock update for each one that became available over time, but that doesn't exist anymore because DS Wi-Fi is dead. Even if you are familiar with how to jump through those hoops, it's still a bit of a hassle that you can just avoid. Finally, there's the super fucked hard bonus puzzles that you unlock by doing things in the main game. They're meant to be the hardest thing in the game, and they certainly live up to that. I'll be real, I could do maybe half of them. The other half were just too far out of my depth, and I decided to just look up the answers, again from that wonderful guide, rather than spend hours banging my head against the wall. I just wasn't having fun anymore, and this isn't me holding that against the game. It absolutely makes sense that the super boss puzzles of the game are so difficult that it kind of feels mean at times. It's meant to provide that kind of challenge for those who want those kinds of puzzles. Mission accomplished on that, I suppose. They're just definitely not made for me specifically. They have a bit more context than the weekly puzzles. You get Layton saying some variety of, "Hey, solve this," followed by a, "Hey, good job," or something to that effect, which is nice, but it would have been even nicer to get something a bit more substantial in that respect. Interestingly enough, there are regional differences as well. I suppose it makes sense to change puzzles with wordplay or cultural references. If you're a real puzzle fanatic, it might be worth tracking down the different puzzles somewhere online and trying your hand at them. I'm not going to, but you can if you want to. So yeah, Professor Layton and the Curious Village. As dubious as I was about stepping out of my comfort zone, I'm very glad that I did. There were a couple of problems that I had, but most of them were easily mitigated with online resources, and most of them are solved in the sequel. Even with the pacing issues, I was constantly looking forward to every NPC and conversation, and yes, I even had fun solving the puzzles. Most of the time. I am incredibly excited to continue making my way through these games, and I'm even considering looking at some other puzzle games just to see if my opinions on the genre have changed with time. It's fun and cute and comfy, and I'll obviously go more in depth on this in a future video, but it's definitely worth putting up with the rough edges of this one to get to the sequel, because it's so good. This has been Kalice. Thanks for watching. You can like the video, subscribe, or share this video around if you enjoyed it and want to. My Patreon exists if you'd like to support me. There's neat bonuses like access to my Discord server and the ability to vote in polls to determine future content on the channel, so feel free to go look at that if you'd like. Speaking of, big thanks to all of my current patrons like Lotta, Edith, and Sam, all of whom are really cool people. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else. I genuinely have no idea when, if ever, I would have played this game if not for the existence of the Ace Attorney crossover. I guess that means the crossover had the intended effect, even if I haven't played it yet. Shit.